Hello again, folks. Welcome back to Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode number 52. And tonight we're returning to Downey Games Fast Action Racing for the 1991 Stock Car Project. We are up to race number 6, which took place at Bristol on April 14th, 1991. This race was known as the Valleydale Meats 500. And the pole was captured by Rusty Wallace, and he was also the race winner. But before we get to setting the grid, let's take a look at the standings after race 5 at Darlington. All right, we can see Kyle Petty's back in first place. He's 2 points over Harry Gant. And the rest of the top 10 is Davey Allison 3rd, Alan Kowicki 4th, Rick Mast 5th, Brett Bodine 6th, Ricky Rudd 7th, Rusty Wallace 8th, Ernie Irvin 9th, and the rookie Bobby Hamilton is in 10th place right now. Driver of note to keep an eye on is Dale Earnhardt, who was the actual winner in 1991. He captured the championship. Had a couple bad breaks in the first few races, but has slowly been crawling his way up north. He's in 21st place right now, so we'll have to keep an eye on him going forward. Excuse me. So, the first thing we do is we'll set the grid. I have the driver cards here, and I'll give them a shuffle and a cut, and then we'll set the grid. Now, remember, this grid is not a representation of positions on the track. It is more of a abstraction, I guess you'd say, of different grooves on the track and how different drivers are positioned near each other, I guess. It's the best way I can describe it. So anyway, we'll start filling out the field here, and we have Davey Allison, Mickey Gibbs, Joe Rootman, Dale Jarrett, Terry Labonte, Bill Elliott, Harry Gant, Alan Kowicki, Dale Earnhardt, Kyle Petty, Chad Little, Brett Bodine, Jimmy Spencer, Rick Wilson, Bobby Hamilton, Sterling Marlin, Ernie Irvin, Lake Speed, Ken Schrader, Darrell Waltrip, Ricky Rudd, Richard Petty, Ted Musgrave, Jeff Bodine, Derek Cope, Mark Martin, Rick Mast, Dave Marcus, Jimmy Means, Michael Waltrip, Stanley Smith, Bobby Hillen Jr., Morgan Shepherd, Rusty Wallace, Hut Strickland, and Larry Pearson. All right, so the first thing we do is we'll roll a red and white die, and we're going to say the red dice first, and we'll determine who the pole sitter is. The pole number is in this little box here, like, for example, Bill Elliott on a 35 to a 36, he would have the pole. So it's a 15, so we're going to look for 15. Or did I say the red die first? Well, we're going to go the white die first. So we're going to look for a 15, and whoever has a 15 will be the pole sitter. And that's Harry Gant. So we'll put the little leader marker there at Harry Gant. So he has the pole. And if you've watched any of these videos before, you know there's a lot of bookkeeping, paperwork, excuse me, you know, at the beginning of the game. So the first thing that's going to happen here is he's going to face a challenge. So he brings them out. He's leading the race, but he's going to be challenged in this early part of the race. And we roll a red and white die to determine that. It's 44. And that is Chad Little. So Chad Little is going to challenge Harry Gant. see. Harry Gant is an 11. Chad Little is an 8. That is, he's challenging at a -3, so he needs a 10 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 5 and fails. So Harry Gant remains the race leader. And that's a fail. And Gant is the race leader here in the early part of the race. Okay, now the first phase is a mechanical check. What we're going to do is we're going to select the driver randomly, and that could be the leader. And we will check that random driver and the 4 adjacent drivers using the rules of the game. I guess you'd say the I'm losing the word right now. Maybe it'll come to me, but so we got a 22. So 22 is Dale Jarrett. So we're going to perform this mechanical check. Dale Jarrett. Ted Musgrave is his 12 o'clock. Derek Cope, this is 3 o'clock. Rules of priority, that's what I was trying to think of. Richard Petty is his 6 o'clock. And Ken Schrader is his 9 o'clock. Okay, so what we do in this mechanical check, we look at the red mechanical avoidance rating. So for Dale Jarrett, it's an 8. Now here at Bristol, that's a -1, so that drops everyone's number by 1. So Dale Jarrett's dropped to a 7. Musgrave is also dropped to a 7. Cope is dropped to a 2. Richard Petty's dropped to a 6. And Ken Schrader's dropped to a 7. So what we need to do here, or what the driver needs to do here, if the dice roll is equal to his mechanical rating, he has a problem, has to come in, go behind the wall, and he'll have a red lap marker. He'll be several laps down. If the die is greater than the mechanical rating, he's forced to retire. Okay, so the first driver we're going to check is Dale Jarrett. He needs less than a 7. And he rolls a 6, so he's good. So he passes. Ted Musgrave also needs less than a 7. He rolls a 7, so unfortunately he has some problems and is going to be down several laps. Fail. Red lap marker. Okay, Derek Cope. Well, Derek Cope needs Snake Eyes to just be lapped several laps down, and he rolls that. How about that? So he avoids having to retire, yet he's down several laps. Fail. Red lap marker. Okay, Richard Petty. Richard Petty needs less than a 6. He rolls an 11, and he's forced to retire. So he's the first driver out of the race. Fail. Did not finish. And last is Ken Schrader. He's at the 9 o'clock position for Dale Jarrett. He needs less than a 7. He rolls an 11, and he's also forced to retire. Fail. Did not finish. And Harry Gant, who was not involved in that, remains the leader. And he will now face another challenge. So we'll select that randomly. That is a 22. It's Dale Jarrett. Dale Jarrett, who just avoided a mechanical failure, he's rated a 10. Harry Gant's an 11. So this challenge will come at -1. Dale Jarrett needs an 8 to 12 to take the lead. And he rolls an 8. We have a new leader in Dale Jarrett. pass. And Jarrett is the new leader. Okay, now we're going to have a phase of green flag racing. So what we do is we select a random driver and the 4 adjacent drivers to that random driver, and they go up against the leader. And we use the quality pass matrix, just like we did in the previous challenge. All right, so Dale Jarrett is the new leader, and he's going to face a challenge from 51, which is Jimmy Spencer, the pride of Berwick, PA. Spencer. And this is using the green race rating. He's an 8. His 12 o'clock is Stanley Smith. He's a 2. His 6 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. Or excuse me, his 3 o'clock is Rusty Wallace. He's an 11. For his 6 o'clock, we roll around to the top, and it's Morgan Shepherd. He's also an 11. And his 9 o'clock is Dave Marcus, who is a 6. Okay, so these challenges are going up against the leader, Dale Jarrett, who's a 10. So first would be Jimmy Spencer. He's an 8. Dale Jarrett's a 10. That's a -2, so he needs a 9 to 12 to be successful. And he rolls a 10. So we have a new race leader in Jimmy Spencer. Now the rest of the challenges will come up against him. So he passes and is now the new race leader. Okay, the next challenge is Stanley Smith. He is 2. That's a -6. That's an automatic fail. And he goes a lap down. So he wasn't challenging for the lead. He was challenging to stay on the lead lap. All right, so Smith fails, and he gets a green lap marker. Okay, next is Rusty Wallace. He's an 11. Jimmy Spencer is an 8. That's at a +3. So he needs a 4 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 6, and Rusty Wallace, who actually won this race back in April 14, 1991, is the new race leader. So that's a pass. And Rusty Wallace is the new race leader. So he'll face these final 2 challenges. The next one is Morgan Shepherd. He's an 11. Rusty Wallace is an 11. Differential of 0. That's a 7 to 12 that Morgan Shepherd needs. And he rolls a 7, and the lead changes again. And it's Morgan Shepherd who passes and is the new race leader. And the final challenge will come from Dave Marcus. Excuse me, he is a 6. Morgan Shepherd's an 11. That's a -5, and that's an automatic failure, but it's not greater than 5, so he remains on the lead lap, but just fails in his challenge. So he failed. And Morgan Shepherd is the new race leader. The next phase is this blue phase here, and these are green flag pit stops. And once again, we're going to do a random selection. 4 adjacent drivers. They will go up against the leader, but this time we'll be looking at the blue pit crew rating. Okay, so that's Morgan Shepherd, and he's going to face a challenge from 52, which is Stanley Smith. I guess it would be Stanley Smith trying to stay on, or stay just 1 lap down. So his adjacent drivers are Rick Wilson, Sterling Marlin is 3 o'clock, Jimmy Spencer is 6 o'clock, and Kyle Petty is 9 o'clock. All right, so we're looking at the blue rating. So Stanley Smith is a 4. Rick Wilson is a 7. Sterling Marlin is an 8. Jimmy Spencer is a 7. And Kyle Petty is a 10. We're all going up against Morgan Shepherd's 8. So first would be Stanley Smith. He is at a -4, so he needs an 11 or 12 to be successful, and he could get his lap back. And he gets a 12, so he gets his lap back. So Stanley Smith is back on the lead lap. He passes, and lead lap. Okay, so Morgan Shepherd is still the race leader. Next would be Rick Wilson. Rick Wilson is a 7. Morgan Shepherd is an 8. That's at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 5, so he fails, but he remains on the lead lap. Fails, and it's still Morgan Shepherd as the leader. Next is Sterling Marlin. He's an 8. Morgan Shepherd is an 8. That's at a 0 differential. So he needs a 7 to 12. And he rolls a 9. And coming out of the pits, we have a new race leader, Sterling Marlin. Okay, so these last two checks will go up against Sterling Marlin. Jimmy Spencer is a 7. Sterling Marlin is an 8. That's a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. Sterling Marlin is still the leader. And last is Kyle Petty. And where is he? He's a 10. Sterling Marlin is an 8. So Kyle Petty is challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. He rolls a 7, and he is the new race leader. After all the pit stops were completed, Kyle Petty is the new race leader. Okay, so now this black phase here. This is to check if there were any pit crew violations that could cause a driver to be forced to come in for a stop and go, and become a lap down. So this is a random selection, and it's just going to be random driver and the 4 adjacent for the pit crew penalty. Okay, here we go. And that's a 6-4, which would be Swervin Irvin. So it's Irvin. And we're looking at the pit crew rating. His is an 8. That's the blue number. His 12 o'clock is Larry Pearson. He's a 4. His 3 o'clock swings over to Darrell Waltrip. And he's an 8. 6 o'clock is Hut Strickland. He's also an 8. And Bobby Hillin Jr. would be his 9 o'clock. And he's a 7. Okay, so we need a die roll lower than or equal to his pit rating. If it's higher, he's lapped. If one of these drivers was already yellow or red lap, they would be forced to retire, but that doesn't apply in this case. So we need Ernie Irvin needs an 8 or less. He's the first check. He rolls snake eyes. He's good, so he passes. Next is Larry Pearson. He needs a 4 or less. Oh, he gets a 5 and goes a lap. He's forced to come in, stop and go. He goes a lap down. So he failed. Green lap. All right, so Darrell Waltrip is next. He is an 8. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 6. No foul for him. Hut Strickland. He's also an 8. 8 or less. He rolls a 7. He's good. And Bobby Hillin Jr. He is a 7. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls an 8, unfortunately, and he gets into trouble too, or should I say his pit crew does. And he's forced to come in for a stop and go. And after all said and done, he's going to be a lap down as well. He failed. Green lap marker. And Kyle Petty is still the race leader. Now, this phase here after the penalties, it's 2 consecutive challenges. So we'll do a random selection. And that is a 36, and that's Rick Mast. He's going to be the first challenge. And we're looking at the green race rating. His is a 9. Excuse me. Kyle Petty is an 11. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12 to take the lead. And he rolls a 10, and we have a new race leader in Rick Mast. So he passed, and he's the new race leader. Now, he's going to face a challenge, the second consecutive challenge. It's going to be going up against Rick Mast, the new race leader, and that is a 55, and that is Bobby Hamilton. And he's a 10. Rick Mast is a 9. He's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. And he fails. So Rick Mast remains the race leader. And now we're going to check for contact. Now, the way this works, it's a random driver for adjacent drivers, and we'll see if there's anybody that had some contact. Or avoided contact. So first we got to do our random driver. That's a 43. That's Jimmy Means. And we're looking at his contact avoidance number, which is an 8. Okay, so Jimmy Means is an 8. That's the yellow number. His 12 o'clock is Chad Little. He's also an 8. 3 o'clock is Rick Wilson. He's a 7. Kyle Petty's a 6. And Alan Kowicki is an 8. Okay, so what we need to do here now, contact has a +1, so that increases everyone's number by 1. I should have written that down. So Means becomes a 9, Little becomes a 9, Wilson becomes an 8, Kyle Petty becomes a 7, and Kowicki becomes a 9. All right, so we'll roll the 2 black die, and if the number is lower, then the contact rating is safe. If the die is equal to the contact rating, he got into some contact, got rubbed or something, had to come in, and he'll go down several laps with the yellow lap marker. And if it's greater than the contact rating, he's forced to retire. All right, so first is Jimmy Means. He's a 9, so he needs less than a 9. And he rolls a 7, so he's safe. Pass. Chad Little. He also needs a 9. He rolls a 7, and he's safe. Rick Wilson. He is an 8 because of the +1 modifier. He rolls a 10 and is forced to retire. Did not finish. So Rick Wilson comes off and joins Richard Petty and Ken Schrader. All right, so he failed. Kyle Petty is a 7, so he needs less than a 7 to be safe. He rolls a 3, and he's good. And last is Alan Kowicki. Alan Kowicki is a 9 because of the +1. So he needs less than a 9. He rolls a 7, and he's good. So he passed. And Rick Mast is still the race leader after all that. Okay, now because we did have contact, now we do another pit crew check, but this time it's under caution. All right, it's the race leader, adjacent cars, and one random. So this does not require a, well, it does require a random roll, but we're only going to select one random driver. So the race leader is Rick Mast. So it's Mast. And this is also a caution check, so these are at a +1. Or excuse me, a contact check. Or no, I'm sorry. This is we use the blue numbers, the pit crew numbers. Rick Mast is an 8. And his 12 o'clock would be Harry Gant down here. He's a 9. His 3 o'clock is Brett Bodine. And he is a 7. 6 o'clock is Dale Earnhardt. And he's a 10. His pit crew is a 10. And his 9 o'clock is Bill Elliott. He is an 8. Actually, I need to also select a random driver, as I mentioned. And that's 26. That's Bill Elliott. He's already selected, so we have to roll again. And that is a 21. He's gone. And that is a 31, and that's Harry Gant. Oh, he's already selected. So we'll roll again. And that is a 34. That's Mark Martin. And he's an 8. All right, so all of these drivers are going to be going up against the race leader. Who was the random? The random was Mark Martin. So first, up against Rick Mast, he has an 8. And Harry Gant has a 9. He's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. And he rolls a 9. And we have a new race leader in Harry Gant. So Gant passed. Leader. Next is Brett Bodine. He's a 7. Gant's a 9. So he's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 10. He's a new race leader. Now remember, these are pit stops under caution, so we may have several lead changes here. Okay, so Brett Bodine passed. And he's the leader now. Dale Earnhardt is a 10. Brett Bodine is a 7. He's challenging at a +3. He needs a 4 to 12. He rolls a 5 and takes the lead. All right, so Dale Earnhardt is the new leader. And the last challenge will come from the random driver, and that is Bill Elliott. Bill Elliott's an 8. Dale Earnhardt's a 10. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 6 and fails. So after those pit stops, Dale Earnhardt is the race leader. Okay, now he's going to face the challenge. And we select that randomly. And that is a 61, and that's Rusty Wallace. Okay, Rusty Wallace, his race rating is an 11. Dale Earnhardt's is an 11. So this is a 50-50 chance here. So at a 0, Rusty Wallace needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 9, and he is, he is the new race leader, Rusty Wallace. All right, so that's a pass. And he's the race leader. He had the lead for a short time earlier in the race. Okay, now we're at the closing laps phases or closing laps action. The first thing we're going to do is to check and see if there is going to be a mechanical check. And that would be the leader checking his mechanical. So there's a very good chance for this happening here at Bristol. On a die roll of a 4 to 12, there is a mechanical check. Now, if he fails this check, he can't be forced to retire. And he rolls a 5, and yes, he has to do a mechanical check. All right, so it's Rusty Wallace. His mechanical avoidance number is a 6. He needs a less than a 6 to pass this mechanical check. If he doesn't, if he fails, this check, the adjacent driver with the highest rating, based on the rules of priority, would take the lead. Okay, so his mechanical failure avoidance number is a 6. He needs less than a 6. He rolls a 7 and fails. So he fails that mechanical check. Fails. He's not lapped, but we have a new race leader. So we have to look at the rules of priority. Okay, Sterling Marlin at 12 o'clock is an 11. Davey Allison's also an 11. Jimmy Spencer is an 8. And Lake Speed is a 6. Now we got Marlin at an 11 and Davey Allison at an 11. Marlin is at the 12 o'clock position. Allison is at the 3. Sterling Marlin takes priority, and he is the new race leader. And he's going to immediately face a challenge. All right. And that challenge is coming from 31, Harry Gant. And he's an 11. Rusty Wallace is an 11. This is a 50-50 chance. Zero differential. Gant needs a 7 to 12 to take the lead. He rolls a 10. Or excuse me, not Rusty Wallace, Sterling Marlin, but they're both still 11s. Gant passes Marlin and takes the lead. So Harry Gant's the new race leader. Okay, I'll put that there. All right, so now we're going to check to see if there was any contact. Contact here at Bristol happens on a 6 to 12. And we rolled a 12, so yes, there's going to be a contact check. And that is the race leader and adjacent cars plus one random driver. So it's Harry Gant. It can't be Derek Cope because he's a lap down. Well, no, it could be Derek Cope. He's several laps down. I believe he's automatically forced to retire in this case. Yes, he is. All right, so it's going to be Gant, Cope at 12 o'clock. Dave Marcus is at 3 o'clock. 6 o'clock would be Rick Mast, all the way up at the top there. Davey Allison would be 9 o'clock. And the random driver is, well, it's Davey Allison. 1-3, Mickey Gibbs. All right, now, contact. Contact gets a +1 here. All right, so Harry Gant, his contact number is a 9, so that becomes a 10. Cope is a 5, that becomes a 6. Marcus, 10, becomes an 11. Mast, 9, becomes a 10. Allison is a 10, he becomes an 11. And Mickey Gibbs is a 9, and he becomes a 10. All right, so we're going to check and see for contact. You have to be lower if you're higher than, or if you're equal to the contact rating, you'll get a yellow lap marker because you had to come in, go behind the wall, whatever. And if the die reading is greater than the contact rating, you're forced to retire. Now, in Derek Cope's case, if he doesn't pass this check, he's going to be forced to retire because he's already red lapped. Or no, as a matter of fact, I believe, yes, he's just forced to retire. But we'll check Harry Gant first anyway. All right. So Harry Gant is a 10. He needs less than a 10. He rolls a 6 and it's good. He passes. Derek Cope said because he's already red lapped, this contact that he's involved in forces him to retire. All right, so he's out. Okay. Dave Marcus is an 11. He needs a 10 or less. He rolls a 7. He's good. Cope failed, did not finish. Marcus passed. Next is Rick Mast. He needs a 10. Or excuse me, he needs a 9 or less. He rolls a 6. Rick Mast passes. Davey Allison needs less than an 11. 10 or less. He rolls a 7, and he passes. And last but not least is Mickey Gibbs. He needs a less than a 10. He rolls a 12, and he is forced to retire. So there was some action there for sure. Let's see. He fails, did not finish. And Harry Gant is still the race leader. Now, pit crew stops under caution. Well, we did have contact, so we need to do a pit crew stop. And that is 4 random drivers. Or, excuse me, a random driver for Jason versus the leader. All right. Of course, the leader is Harry Gant. I'm sorry, it's different here in the ending phase. It's the leader, his 4 Jason, and 1 random driver. So it's going to be, and they're all going to be going up against Harry Gant. All right. These are pit stops, and we're going to be looking at the blue pit number. So Alan Kowicki. And he's an 8. 3 o'clock would be Dave Marcus. He is a 7. Rick Mast is the 6 o'clock, and he is an 8. Davey Allison is the 9 o'clock. He's also an 8. And then 1 random driver. And that is 65. It can't be a lapped driver, so it can't be Larry Pearson. 61. Or excuse me, 16 is Ricky Rudd. Who led the most laps at the actual Valleydale Meats 500 back in 91. And he is a 9. So we will use the quality pass matrix, and all these challenges will go up against Harry Gant. Remember, these are pit stops under caution due to the contact we had. All right, so the first is Alan Kowicki. He's an 8. Harry Gant's a 9. He's challenging at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. And he rolls a 12. And for right now, anyway, Alan Kowicki is the race leader. Okay, Dave Marcus. Kowicki is an 8. Marcus is a 7. He's challenging at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. He rolls a 7 and fails, but he remains on the lead lap. Rick Mast, 8. Kowicki's an 8. That's a 0. Mast needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 5, and he fails. And Kowicki is still the race leader. Next is Davey Allison. They're both 8s also. So he needs a 7 to 12. That's Allison. He rolls a 10, and he's the new race leader. So Allison passed, leader. And last, Ricky Rudd, he's a 9. Allison's an 8. He's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. And he rolls a 6, and Ricky Rudd is your new race leader. So after all of those pit stops under caution were completed, we come out of that with Ricky Rudd being the race leader. Okay. Next is a challenge. We're back to another challenge here. And we do that randomly. We'll be going up against Ricky Rudd. And that is a 54. It's Bobby Hillen Jr. He would be challenging to get back on the lead lap or stay a lap down. So that's what we're going to do here. Ricky Rudd's an 11. Hillen Jr. is a 10. He's challenging at a -1. He's a 10. He's challenging at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12 to get back on the lead lap. He rolls a 7. So he fails and he stays a lap down. And Ricky Rudd remains your race leader. Okay, the next phase is another pit crew phase, but it says event void if pit stops under caution have taken place. So that's no. And Ricky Rudd still remains the race leader. Now we check to see if there's any green flag racing at the end. And here at Bristol, on a roll of 7 to 12, there is. And we roll a 7, so there will be. And this is once again adjacent cars to the race leader and one random. So it's going to be Davey Allison. We're looking at the green race rating. He's an 11. Bill Elliott. He's an 8. Joe Rootman, he's also an 8. He's an 8. And Ricky Rudd's 9 o'clock comes all the way over here. It's Lake Speed. He's a 6. And we need one random driver. That's a 23. Can't be Ted Musgrave. He's lapped. And roll again. That's a 35. It's Dale Earnhardt. And he is a 10. All right, so first would be Davey Allison. Davey Allison's first. He's an 11. Ricky Rudd's an 11. He's challenging at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12 to be the new race leader. He rolls an 11 and takes the lead. So Allison passed. He's the leader. Okay, and the next challenge is coming from Bill Elliott against Davey Allison. They're both 11s. And that is 0, so Elliott needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. So Allison is still the leader. Next is Joe Rootman. He's a 9. Allison's an 11. It's a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails. Next is Lake Speed. He's a 6. An 11. That's a -5. It's an automatic failure, but he remains on the lead lap. And last but not least is Dale Earnhardt. He's in 11. Davey Allison is in 11. So Earnhardt takes the lead on a 7-12. He rolls a 7, and your new race leader, as we're coming down to the wire, is Dale Earnhardt. Okay, now we have the final challenge. The way the final challenge works, we look at the race leader, and the highest race-rated driver, going by rules of priority, will pose a final challenge to the leader, and that'll determine who won this race. So we're coming down to the wire, and let's see, Master's in 9, Michael Waltrip's in 11, Mark Martin's in 11, Jeff Bodine's in 11. Michael Waltrip wins the rules of priority because he's at 3 o'clock. So here we are coming down to the wire here at Bristol, or the last couple laps or whatever. And Earnhardt's being challenged by Michael Waltrip. They're both 11s. That's set a 0 on a 7-12. Michael Waltrip will pass Earnhardt and win this race on a 7-12. He rolls an 8, and coming down to the wire, Michael Waltrip is your race winner. All right. So now the fun part. This is the part that can get a little bit confusing in this game. Is setting the finishing order. Well, of course, Michael Waltrip won the race, so he's first. Okay, and we're going to put this marker back here. The driver who lost the challenge, Dale Earnhardt, who I said we need to start looking out for, scored a lot of points today, finished second, and he led some laps, so that's going to definitely help him climb up in the standings. Okay, the other drivers who were eligible for the challenge will also get removed based on rules of priority. So Earnhardt was here. These were the 4 drivers, all right? So it's going to be Mark Martin, Jeff Bodine, and then Rick Mast. Okay, so that's the first part. Now, next we go into the groove that the winner was in. And that would be this middle groove here. It's sort of, you can see here in these 3 numbers, it's this groove here, the 25, 35, and it goes around like this. So what we do is we go around clockwise, starting at where the leader was. And we look for the highest race ratings as we go around clockwise. So these are 10s. Here's an 11, a Kyle Petty. So Kyle Petty is next. Okay, so we've gone all around the 11s. Next it would be Bobby Hamilton. Bobby Hillens lapped. Dale Jarrett. And Terry Labonte. Okay, so now that's the rest of the cars that are on this group. Oh, Stanley Smith. Almost missed Stanley Smith. All right, the rest of the cars on this groove, Hillen Jr. and Ted Musgrave, they're both lapped, so they don't come off yet. So the rules say after you finish the groove that the winner was in, if possible, and in this case it is, you always move to the center groove. If it would have been out here, we would have moved, to the middle groove. But we're moving to the center groove, and we're looking for the highest rated drivers. So it's Alan Kulwicki, Chad Little, and Jimmy Means. All right, so now we go out to the outside groove. Non-lap drivers, highest. Okay, Morgan Shepherd's an 11. That's as high as you can go. Ernie Irvin's an 11. Hut Strickland's an 11. Sterling Marlin. Rusty Wallace. Harry Gant. Davey Allison. Darrell Waltrip. Ricky Rudd. Bill Elliott. Okay, so now we go to 10s. Out there. There's no 10s. 9s would be Brett Bodine. Joe Rootman. All right, 8s. Jimmy Spencer. There's no 7s. 6 would be Lake Speed. And then Dave Marcus. And now we're up to lap drivers. So the next one would be back to the winner's groove. And that would be Bobby Hillen Jr. Now we go in, there's nobody there. Or excuse me. Then we go back out to Larry Pearson because he's the only other green lap driver. And then finally, Ted Musgrave, who was many laps down, he'll be next. And then we take the drivers who did not finish in the order they did not finish and put them also in the stack here. And your top 10 for the Valleydale Meats 500 at Bristol on April 14th, 1991 in a replay is Michael Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, Mark Martin, Jeff Bodine, Rick Mast. 6th, Kyle Petty, Bobby Hamilton, Dale Jarrett, Terry Labonte, and Stanley Smith finishes in the top 10. So there you have it. Race number 6 at Bristol. The Valleydale Meats 500 is in the books. I'll update the standings before the next race sometime down the road. If you hung out, I appreciate you staying this long. And until next time, take care.